The morning fog clung to the windows of Kensington Palace like ghostly fingers, refusing to let the autumn sun break through. Prince William stood at the edge of his father's bedside, watching the steady rise and fall of King Charles III chest beneath the heavy blankets. The machines surrounding the bed hummed softly, their rhythmic beeping the only sound breaking the suffocating silence that had settled over the royal residence for the past 3 days. William's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his father's blanket for what felt like the 100th time that morning. The doctors had been clear about the prognosis. The cancer that had been quietly ravaging his father's body had accelerated beyond all expectations. What they had hoped would be months had become weeks, and now those weeks had dwindled to days, perhaps hours. "Your Majesty should rest," whispered Dr. Harrison, the royal physician who had become a permanent fixture in the palace corridors. His kind eyes held the weight of delivering impossible news to families who believed themselves untouchable by ordinary human frailties. William shook his head, his jaw set in the same stubborn line that had characterized the Windsor men for generations. "I'm not leaving him alone." His voice carried the authority of a future king, but underneath lay the tremor of a son watching his father slip away. Catherine had tried to convince him to take breaks, to eat something, to sleep for just a few hours. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, had been asking when Grandpa would come home from his special treatment. How do you explain to a child that sometimes the people we love most don't come home at all? The irony wasn't lost on William that just 18 months ago, he and his father had finally found their rhythm. After years of distance, misunderstandings, and the inevitable tension that comes with being heir to the throne, they had discovered a friendship that transcended their royal roles. Charles had begun sharing stories of his own struggles with duty versus personal desires, helping William navigate the complexities of modern monarchy while raising a family in the public eye. Now, watching his father's peaceful face, William felt the weight of everything left unsaid pressing down on his chest like a physical burden. There were conversations they should have had, questions he should have asked, wisdom he should have sought while there was still time. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts, and the Princess Royal stepped into the room with the quiet efficiency that had defined her throughout her life. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but dry. She had always been the strongest of Charles's siblings, the one who faced reality head-on without flinching. "Any change?" she asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. William shook his head. "He's been like this since yesterday evening." Peaceful, but he couldn't finish the sentence. The word distant seemed too final, too accepting of what was coming, and moved to the opposite side of the bed, placing her weathered hands on the rail. She had spent countless hours here over the past weeks, reading to their father from his favorite books, sharing memories of their childhood at Balmoral, telling him about her latest charity work. The conversations had grown increasingly one-sided as Charles slipped deeper into the fog of medication and exhaustion. "He's proud of you," and said suddenly, her gaze fixed on her brother's face. "He told me yesterday, when you stepped out to call Catherine, said he never worried about the monarchy's future because he knew you understood what it really meant to serve." The words hit William like a physical blow. His father had always been sparing with praise, believing that preparation for kingship required honest criticism more than empty flattery. To hear that Charles felt confident in his son's readiness was both a gift and a crushing responsibility. "I don't feel ready," William admitted, the words escaping before he could stop them. "There's so much he hasn't taught me yet, so many things I still need to know." And smile was sad but knowing. None of us ever feel ready for the moment our parents leave us. But Charles didn't become the king he was through lessons alone. He became himself through living, through making mistakes, through learning that being human and being royal aren't mutually exclusive. Before William could respond, a subtle change in the room's atmosphere made them both turn toward the bed. Charles's breathing had shifted, becoming shallower, but somehow more purposeful. His eyelids fluttered, and for the first time in hours, he seemed to be fighting his way back to consciousness. "Papa." William leaned forward, his heart racing. "Can you hear me?" Charles's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, but gradually finding his son's face. When recognition dawned, a slight smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "William," he whispered, his voice barely audible but clear. "I'm here, Papa. We're all here." Charles's gaze shifted around the room, taking in Anne's presence, the familiar surroundings of his private quarters. With tremendous effort, he raised one hand slightly from the blanket. William immediately clasped it, surprised by how cold his father's skin felt despite the warm room. "Need to tell you something," Charles managed, each word requiring visible effort. "Important." William leaned closer, his ear almost touching his father's lips. "What is it?" "I'm listening." Charles's grip on his son's hand tightened with surprising strength. "Promise me," he wheezed. "Promise you'll do what I couldn't." "Anything, Papa. Whatever you need." "Find her," Charles whispered, his eyes gaining intensity despite his physical weakness. "Find Diana's daughter." The words hit William like a lightning bolt, sending shockwaves through every nerve in his body. He jerked back, staring at his father's face in complete bewilderment. "What did you say?" But Charles's eyes had already begun to close again, the effort of speaking those few words having drained what little energy he had managed to gather. His breathing returned to the shallow, rhythmic pattern that had characterized the past day. "Papa." William's voice was urgent now, desperate. "What do you mean? What daughter?" And had moved closer, her face pale with shock. "Charles, what are you talking about?" But the king had slipped back into the twilight state that hovered between consciousness and the final sleep. His hand remained in William's grip, but the intentional pressure was gone, replaced by the limp weight of exhaustion. William stared at his father's peaceful face, his mind reeling with the implications of what he had just heard. Diana's daughter. The words echoed in his head like a mantra, each repetition bringing new questions and a growing sense of unreality. His mother had died when he was 15 years old, in that terrible car crash in Paris that had shattered his world and changed the trajectory of his life forever. In the 26 years since her death, every detail of her life had been dissected, analyzed, and reported on by countless journalists, biographers, and conspiracy theorists. How could there be a daughter that no one knew about? "Did you hear what he said?" William asked, and his voice hollow with shock, and nodded slowly, her typically composed expression showing cracks of confusion and concern. "But, William, that's impossible. Your mother never had another child. We would have known. Would we?" William's question hung in the air like an accusation. The royal family had spent decades managing secrets, controlling narratives, protecting reputations. If there was one thing his upbringing had taught him, it was that the phrase, "we would have known," carried very little certainty when it came to the House of Windsor. Dr. Harrison had been quietly monitoring from the corner of the room, but now he stepped forward with professional concern. "Your Majesty, deathbed utterances can sometimes be the result of medication or the brain's response to oxygen deprivation. People often speak of things that aren't necessarily based in reality." William wanted to believe that explanation. It would be so much easier to dismiss his father's words as the confused rambling of a dying man. But something in Charles's eyes, in the intensity of his grip, in the specific nature of his request, suggested otherwise. "He asked me to promise," William said, more to himself than to the others in the room. "He asked me to find her," and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "William, you need to think carefully about this." Even if there was some truth to what Charles said, pursuing it could open doors that might be better left closed. The monarchy has worked hard to move past the difficulties of the past. But William barely heard her words. His mind was racing through memories, searching for any hint, any clue that might support his father's shocking revelation. He thought about the times Diana had disappeared for days at a time, claiming she needed space to think. He remembered the periods when she seemed distant, distracted, as if carrying some heavy burden that she couldn't share. There had been whispers, of course, over the years. Rumors about Diana's relationships, speculation about secret pregnancies, wild theories about hidden children. The tabloids had published every conceivable story about the people's princess, but most of it had been dismissed as fantasy designed to sell newspapers. "I need to know the truth," William said finally, his voice gaining strength as the decision crystallized in his mind. "Whatever the truth is, I need to know it," and studied his face with the sharp intelligence that had made her one of the most respected members of the royal family. "And if the truth is something that could damage the monarchy, something that could hurt your children's future?" William looked down at his father's sleeping form. Charles had spent his entire life balancing personal desires against royal duty, often choosing duty at great personal cost. The request he had just made suggested that this balance had come with consequences William was only beginning to understand. "Then, we'll deal with it," William said quietly. "But I won't let Papa's last wish go unfulfilled because we're afraid of what we might find." The room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of the medical equipment. Outside, London continued its daily routine, unaware that within the walls of Kensington Palace, the future King of England had just received a charge that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his family, his mother, and himself. As the afternoon wore on, William remained at his father's side, holding the hand that had delivered such earth-shaking news. But his mind was already moving beyond the confines of the sick room, beginning to formulate plans for a search that would take him into the darkest corners of royal history. He thought about Catherine, about how he would explain this impossible situation to his wife. He thought about his children, who deserved to grow up with certainty about their family's legacy. Most of all, he thought about Diana, about the mother he had lost so young, and wondered what secrets she had taken with her to that tunnel in Paris. The promise his father had asked him to make weighed heavily on his conscience. Find her. Two simple words that carried the potential to reshape everything he understood about his family and his destiny. As evening approached and the fog finally lifted from the palace windows, William made his decision. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, he would honor his father's final wish. He would find Diana's daughter, even if the search destroyed everything he thought he knew about the woman he had spent his life grieving. The future King of England was about to embark on a journey that would test not only his resolve, but his understanding of what it truly meant to be both a Windsor and a son. 3 weeks had passed since King Charles III drew his final breath, and William still felt the weight of his father's last words pressing against his chest like a stone. The funeral had been a magnificent affair, watched by billions around the world, but for William, the ceremony had passed in a blur of protocol and grief. Now, as King William V, he found himself sitting in the same study where his father had spent countless hours, staring at a manila folder that contained the beginnings of an investigation that could unravel everything. The transition to kingship had been as smooth as constitutional monarchy could manage, but William felt utterly unprepared for the emotional complexity of his new role. Every decision carried the weight of history. Every public appearance was scrutinized for signs of how the new reign would differ from his father's. Yet none of the constitutional experts or royal advisors could help him with the promise that haunted his every quiet moment. Catherine entered the study carrying a tea service, her movements graceful despite the exhaustion that had settled around her eyes. The past month had taken its toll on the entire family, but she had shouldered the additional burden of supporting William through both his grief and his growing obsession with his father's final request. "Any progress?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. The question had become routine between them, asked with the careful neutrality of someone who wasn't sure they wanted to hear the answer. William gestured to the folder. "James thinks he's found something. A trail at least. Fragments of information that might lead somewhere." James Morrison was a private investigator William had known since university, someone whose discretion was absolute and whose methods were thorough without being public. In the 3 weeks since William had contacted him, James had been carefully reconstructing Diana's movements during specific periods in the 1990s, looking for gaps in the public record that might hide something significant. "What kind of trail?" Catherine's voice carried the controlled concern that had become her default tone when discussing this matter. She understood William's need to honor his father's request, but she also worried about where this path might lead their family. William opened the folder, revealing photographs, photocopied documents, and handwritten notes. Remember that summer in 1992 when Diana went to stay with her friend Sarah in Scotland? The press reported it as a retreat to recover from the stress of the separation announcement. Catherine nodded. The dissolution of Charles and Diana's marriage had been played out in excruciating detail in the media, but there had been periods when Diana had simply vanished from public view, emerging weeks later with explanations that satisfied the press, but left gaps that now seemed significant. James found medical records. William continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Private clinic in Edinburgh. Diana was there for 6 weeks, not the 2 weeks reported. The records are incomplete, but there are payments for obstetric care. The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Catherine felt her heart rate accelerate as the implications became clear. Obstetric care in 1992 would mean a baby born in late 1992 or early 1993, William finished. Which means she would be 32 or 33 now. Old enough to have a life, a family, a completely separate existence from anything royal. Catherine studied her husband's face, seeing the mixture of excitement and terror that had characterized his expression for weeks. William, even if this is true, even if Diana did have another child, what does that mean for us? For our children? For the monarchy itself? It was the question that kept William awake at night. The constitutional implications alone were staggering. If Diana had given birth to another child during her marriage to Charles, that child would technically be in line for the throne ahead of William's own children. The mere possibility could destabilize the succession and create a constitutional crisis unlike anything the monarchy had faced in centuries. I don't know, William admitted, but Papa asked me to find her. He must have had a reason. Or he was dying and confused and speaking nonsense, Catherine said gently. She had avoided saying it so directly before, but the investigation was consuming William, and she was beginning to fear for his well-being. William stood and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. The autumn leaves were falling steadily now, carpeting the ground in shades of gold and brown that reminded him of Diana's hair. There's more, Catherine. James found adoption records. A private adoption arranged through a firm that specialized in discretion. Catherine's teacup rattled as she set it down too quickly. Adoption records? A baby girl born January 15th, 1993, in Edinburgh. Birth mother listed only as DS, father unknown. The adoption was finalized within days of the birth, which is unusual even for private arrangements. DS could be anyone. William. Diana Spencer, William said quietly. Before she married Papa, before she became Princess of Wales, she was Lady Diana Spencer. James thinks the initials were a way of maintaining some connection while preserving anonymity. Catherine joined him at the window, slipping her hand into his. What do you want to do with this information? I want to find her, William said, the certainty in his voice surprising even himself. I want to know who she is, what her life has been like, whether she knows anything about her birth parents. And then what? William, think about this practically. If you find this woman, if she is Diana's daughter, what happens next? Do you tell her she's your sister? Do you explain that she's technically in line for the throne? Do you invite her to family dinner and hope she doesn't call the tabloids? William had been wrestling with these same questions for weeks, and he still didn't have satisfactory answers. But his father's voice echoed in his memory, carrying an urgency that suggested this wasn't just about satisfying curiosity. James thinks he knows where she is, William said suddenly. Her name is Emma Richardson. She's a teacher in Manchester, married with 2 young children. She was adopted by a middle-class family who never told her about her birth parents. The specificity of the information made Catherine's breath catch. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was a real person with a real life, someone who had no idea that her existence could reshape the British monarchy. "Have you seen her photograph?" Catherine asked. William pulled a printed image from the folder. It showed a woman in her early 30s with blonde hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, surrounded by smiling children in what was clearly a classroom setting. Her face was heart-shaped with high cheekbones, and her smile had a warmth that was immediately familiar. Catherine stared at the image, feeling a chill of recognition. "She looks like Diana. She has Diana's eyes," William said softly. "The same expression Diana got when she was working with children. Look at how the kids are gathered around her. She has the same presence." Catherine handed the photograph back, her mind reeling with the implications. "William, this woman has built a life completely separate from all of this. She has a husband, children, a career. What gives us the right to disrupt that with information that could destroy everything she's built?" It was a fair question, and one that had been plaguing William's conscience since James had provided Emma's identity. But there was another consideration that Catherine hadn't mentioned, one that William had been reluctant to voice. "What if she already knows?" William asked. "What if she's been waiting for us to find her?" The possibility hung between them like a challenge. If Emma Richardson knew about her royal birth, then her entire adult life had been built on the knowledge that she was living outside her true identity. If she didn't know, then William's investigation would destroy the carefully constructed world her adoptive parents had created for her. "There's only one way to find out," William said, making a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. "I have to meet her." Catherine turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "William, you can't just appear on this woman's doorstep. You're the King of England now. Your presence in her life would immediately expose everything, regardless of what she knows or doesn't know." "Then, I won't go as the king," William said. "James has arranged for me to attend an education conference in Manchester next month. Emma Richardson will be there presenting on innovative teaching methods for disadvantaged children. I can approach her as someone interested in her work. And if she recognizes you?" William smiled grimly. "Then we'll know she's been expecting this conversation for 32 years. Catherine studied her husband's face, recognizing the determination that had carried him through military service and royal duty. Once William made up his mind about something important, changing his course became nearly impossible. "I want to come with you," she said finally. "Catherine, that would only make it more complicated. If both of us appear together. If you're going to potentially turn this woman's world upside down, you shouldn't do it alone," Catherine interrupted. "And if she's Diana's daughter, then she's my sister-in-law. I have a right to be part of this." William felt a rush of gratitude toward his wife. Throughout their marriage, Catherine had been his anchor, the person who helped him navigate the impossible balance between personal desires and royal obligations. Her willingness to support him in this investigation, despite her obvious reservations, reminded him why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. "There's something else," William said, reaching for another document in the folder. James found evidence that Diana might have maintained some contact over the years. Payments made through shell companies, educational trusts that benefited Emma's adoptive family, anonymous donations to causes she supported. Catherine examined the financial records, noting the careful way the transactions had been structured to avoid detection. This suggests Diana never completely let go, which means Papa might have known all along, William realized. If Diana was supporting Emma throughout her childhood, Charles would have eventually discovered the financial irregularities. He might have been protecting this secret for decades. The revelation added new weight to Charles's deathbed request. If he had been carrying this knowledge for years, watching William build his own family while knowing that Diana's other child remained hidden, his final words took on the urgency of a long-suppressed guilt. "William," Catherine said quietly, "what if this isn't about finding Emma for her sake? What if your father wanted you to find her because he felt guilty about keeping her existence secret all these years?" It was a possibility that had occurred to William, but hearing Catherine voice it made the implications feel more real. Charles had spent his life managing the delicate balance between personal feelings and royal duty. If he had discovered Diana's secret and chosen to protect the monarchy by keeping it hidden, his final request to William might have been an attempt at posthumous redemption. "Then, I owe it to him to make this right," William said. "And I owe it to Diana to acknowledge the daughter she couldn't publicly claim." Catherine nodded slowly, her decision made. "When do we leave for Manchester?" William looked at his wife with profound love and appreciation. The investigation that had begun as a personal quest to honor his father's memory had evolved into something much larger, a chance to heal wounds that had been festering for decades, to acknowledge truths that had been buried under layers of protocol and protection. 2 weeks, William said. "James will have everything arranged. We'll go as private citizens interested in education reform. Just two parents concerned about giving children the best possible start in life." As they stood together in the study where Charles had spent so many hours wrestling with the responsibilities of kingship, William felt the weight of his father's legacy settling around his shoulders. But for the first time since Charles's death, that weight felt like a gift rather than a burden. In 2 weeks, he would meet the woman who might be his sister. In 2 weeks, he would learn whether his father's final wish was the product of a dying man's confusion or the key to understanding secrets that had shaped their family for over 3 decades. The investigation was no longer about satisfying curiosity or honoring a deathbed promise. It had become about truth, about justice, and about the possibility that even the most carefully guarded royal secrets could eventually find their way into the light. The Manchester Convention Center buzzed with the energy of hundreds of educators gathered for the annual Innovation in Learning Conference. William and Catherine moved through the crowd with the careful anonymity that years of royal training had perfected, their security detail maintaining a discreet distance while keeping watchful eyes on the surrounding attendees. To any casual observer, they appear to be just another couple interested in educational reform, perhaps wealthy philanthropists looking for worthy causes to support. William's heart hammered against his ribs as they approached the conference hall, where Emma Richardson was scheduled to present her research on creative learning environments for underprivileged children. 3 weeks of preparation couldn't calm the anxiety that had been building since they left London that morning. Every possible scenario had played through his mind during the drive north, from awkward introductions to devastating revelations. But nothing had prepared him for the reality of potentially meeting Diana's hidden daughter. Catherine squeezed his hand as they took seats in the middle of the audience, close enough to observe Emma clearly, but far enough back to avoid drawing attention. "Remember," she whispered, "we're here to listen first. Whatever happens, let her lead the conversation." The advice was sound, but William wondered if he would be able to maintain such restraint when faced with someone who might hold the key to understanding his mother's deepest secrets. The photograph James had provided showed a striking resemblance to Diana, but photographs could be misleading. Would the similarities be as obvious in person? A hush fell over the audience as the conference moderator stepped to the podium to introduce the next presenter. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emma Richardson from Oakfield Primary School, who will be sharing her groundbreaking work on emotional intelligence development in early childhood education." William's breath caught as a woman walked confidently onto the stage. Even from their middle row seats, the resemblance to Diana was unmistakable. Emma had the same graceful posture, the same way of moving that suggested both strength and gentleness. When she smiled at the audience, William felt a jolt of recognition that went beyond physical similarity. It was Diana's smile, warm and inclusive, immediately establishing connection with everyone in the room. "Good morning, everyone," Emma began, her voice carrying the slight musical quality that William remembered from his mother's public speeches. "I want to start today by talking about a little girl named Sophie, who came into my classroom 3 years ago, convinced that she was stupid." As Emma began her presentation, William found himself drawn into her narrative. She spoke with passion about children who had been failed by traditional educational approaches, kids from broken homes who needed more than academic instruction to reach their potential. Her teaching philosophy centered on seeing each child as a complete person worthy of individual attention and respect, an approach that echoed Diana's own work with marginalized communities. Every child has a story, Emma continued, clicking through slides that showed before and after photographs of her students. Our job as educators isn't just to teach reading and math. It's to help each child understand that their story matters, that they matter regardless of where they come from or what challenges they've faced. Catherine glanced at William, noting the intensity with which he watched Emma's every movement. The woman on stage was clearly gifted, commanding the audience's attention not through royal breeding or inherited charisma, but through genuine passion for her work and deep empathy for the children she served. Sophie is now in her final year of primary school, Emma said, her voice softening with pride. She's planning to become a teacher herself someday, because she wants other children to feel the way we made her feel, seen, valued, and capable of amazing things. The presentation continued for 20 minutes, with Emma fielding questions from the audience with intelligence and humor. William found himself hanging on every word, not just because of what she was saying, but because of how she said it. The cadence of her speech, the way she tilted her head when thinking, the graceful gestures she used to emphasize points, all of it reminded him powerfully of his mother. When the applause finally died down and Emma left the stage, William felt paralyzed with indecision. They had planned to approach her after her presentation, but the reality of actually initiating contact felt overwhelming. What if she recognized him? What if she didn't? What if everything James had discovered was wrong, and this remarkable woman had no connection to Diana at all? She's heading toward the book display, Catherine observed quietly. This is your chance. William stood on unsteady legs, his mouth dry with nervous anticipation. They made their way through the dispersing crowd toward the area where Emma was examining educational materials at various vendor booths. She stood alone, making notes in a small journal as she reviewed different teaching resources. "Excuse me," William said, approaching from her left side. "Ms. Richardson?" Emma looked up from her journal, and William felt the world shift around him. Up close, the resemblance to Diana was even more pronounced. She had the same blue eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same immediate warmth in her expression. But there was something else, something that made William's heart race with possibility. "Yes." Emma smiled politely. "Did you enjoy the presentation?" "Very much," William managed, grateful that his voice sounded steadier than he felt. "I'm William, and this is my wife, Catherine. We're both very interested in your work with disadvantaged children." Emma's expression remained friendly, but professional. If she recognized them, she showed no sign of it. "Thank you. Are you educators yourselves?" "Not exactly," Catherine answered smoothly. "We're involved with charitable work, particularly programs that support children from difficult backgrounds. Your approach seems remarkably effective." "Well, it's not really revolutionary," Emma said with a modest deflection that Diana had always used when praised for her charitable work. "It's just about treating children as individuals rather than statistics. Every child deserves to feel special." The phrase hit William like a physical blow. "Every child deserves to feel special" had been one of Diana's most frequently quoted beliefs, something she had said in countless interviews about her work with children's charities. Hearing those exact words from Emma's lips felt like a message from beyond the grave. "That's a beautiful philosophy," William said carefully. "Did you develop that approach through your own experiences, or was it something you learned during your training?" Emma's expression grew thoughtful. "I think it came from my own childhood, actually. I was adopted when I was very young, and my parents always made sure I knew that being adopted made me special, not different. They taught me that every child has value, regardless of their circumstances." William felt Catherine's hand brush against his arm, a silent signal to proceed carefully. Emma had just confirmed that she was adopted, but she showed no awareness of the significance of that information in the context of their conversation. That must have given you a unique perspective on working with children who feel displaced or uncertain about their place in the world, Catherine observed. Absolutely, Emma agreed. I think children who grow up feeling different, whether because of adoption, divorce, poverty, or any other reason, often develop stronger empathy for others who are struggling. We understand what it feels like to wonder where you belong. William's heart ached as he listened to Emma describe feelings he recognized from his own childhood. After Diana's death, he had spent years wondering where he fit in the world, struggling to balance his royal responsibilities with his need to grieve privately. Have you ever wondered about your birth parents? The question slipped out before William could stop himself. Emma's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. That's a rather personal question for someone I just met. I'm sorry, William said quickly. I didn't mean to pry. It's just that your work with children seems so intuitive, so natural. I wondered if there was some deeper connection. Emma studied his face for a long moment, and William had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing more than he intended to reveal. My adoptive parents were wonderful, she said finally. They gave me everything I needed to become the person I am today. I've never felt the need to look beyond that. But something in her tone suggested that the subject wasn't as settled as she claimed. There was a slight hesitation, a careful way of choosing her words that implied deeper thoughts left unspoken. Of course, Catherine said gently. Your parents sound like remarkable people. They were, Emma agreed, and the past tense made William's pulse quicken. They passed away several years ago, within months of each other. It was devastating, but also beautiful in its own way. They had been married for 43 years and couldn't imagine life without each other. I'm so sorry for your loss, William said, meaning it deeply. If James's research was correct, Emma's adoptive parents had taken in Diana's secret child and raised her with love and stability, never knowing they were protecting a royal secret. Thank you, Emma said softly. They would have loved knowing that their investment in my education led to work that helps other children. They always believed that love multiplies when you share it. The conversation was interrupted by a conference organizer approaching their small group. Ms. Richardson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the publishers from Pearson Education are hoping to speak with you about your research. Would you have a few minutes? Emma glanced apologetically at William and Catherine. I'm afraid I need to go. It was lovely meeting you both. If you're ever in Manchester, please feel free to visit Oakfield. We're always happy to show interested supporters what we're doing. She handed William a business card, their fingers brushing briefly during the exchange. For just a moment, William felt a connection that seemed to transcend the casual interaction, something deeper and more significant than polite conversation between strangers. Thank you, William said, holding the card carefully as if it were a precious artifact. We like that very much. As Emma walked away with the conference organizer, William and Catherine stood in stunned silence, processing everything they had just experienced. Well, Catherine asked quietly. She's Diana's daughter, William said with absolute certainty. Every gesture, every expression, even the way she phrases things. It's like watching a piece of my mother come back to life. But she doesn't know, Catherine observed. Or if she does, she's an exceptional actress. William studied the business card in his hands. Emma Richardson, it read in simple black letters. Primary school teacher. Specialist in early childhood development. No indication of the royal blood that might flow through her veins. What do we do now? Catherine asked. William was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma across the room as she engaged in animated conversation with the publishers. She was clearly in her element, discussing her passion for education with the enthusiasm of someone who had found their true calling. I don't know, William admitted. Papa asked me to find her, and I have. But he didn't tell me what to do once I found her. Maybe finding her was enough, Catherine suggested. Maybe he just wanted you to know that she exists, that she's well, that Diana's other child grew up to be someone she would be proud of. William considered this possibility. Perhaps Charles's deathbed request hadn't been about disrupting Emma's life or creating constitutional chaos. Perhaps it had simply been about acknowledging a truth that had been hidden for too long, about ensuring that Diana's sacrifice in giving up her daughter hadn't been forgotten. She deserves to know the truth, William said finally. Not because it will change her life or give her some claim to the throne, but because everyone deserves to know where they came from, and if the truth destroys the life she's built. It was the question that had haunted William for weeks, but watching Emma interact with the conference attendees, seeing her confidence and genuine happiness, he realized something important. "Look at her," William said to Catherine. "Really look at her. She's exactly the person Diana would have wanted her daughter to become. Strong, compassionate, dedicated to helping others. The truth might be painful, but it won't change who she is." Catherine followed his gaze, observing Emma's interactions with colleagues and strangers alike. There was an unmistakable quality about her, a presence that drew people in and made them feel valued. It was the same gift Diana had possessed, the ability to make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. What do you want to tell her?" Catherine asked. William slipped Emma's business card into his pocket, making a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. Carefully, privately, and with all the love and respect she deserves. As they left the convention center that afternoon, William felt the weight of his father's final request shifting from burden to purpose. He had found Diana's daughter, confirmed her identity, and witnessed the remarkable woman she had become. Now came the most difficult part, revealing a truth that would change everything she thought she knew about herself, while somehow preserving the beautiful life she had built. The drive back to London gave William and Catherine hours to plan their next steps. By the time they reached the palace, they had decided on a course of action that honored both Emma's right to know the truth and her right to control how that truth affected her future. 3 days later, William sat in his private study, composing the most important letter he had ever written. It would be delivered anonymously to Emma Richardson at her school, with instructions to contact a phone number if she wished to learn more about her birth parents. The letter began simply, "Dear Ms. Richardson, you don't know me, but I believe I know something about your family history that you might want to understand. If you're interested in learning about your birth parents, please call the number below. If not, please destroy this letter and know that your privacy will always be respected." As William sealed the envelope, he felt his father's presence in the room, and for the first time since Charles's death, that presence brought him peace rather than pain. He had found Diana's daughter, and soon she would have the choice to find them. The rest, William realized, was up to her.